Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. Get ready to jump into something that really underpins almost every meaningful human interaction. The art of telling a story that actually connects.
Hmm. It's fundamental, isn't it?
It really is. You know that feeling when someone is talking and you're just utterly captivated? You're right there with them, seeing what they saw, feeling what they felt.
Yeah, totally drawn in.
Or maybe, the flip side, where you're listening patiently, but your mind is like miles away because the narrative just isn't landing.
We've all been there, polite nodding.
Exactly. So we're here to figure out the difference. We're exploring what makes a story stick, what makes your communication not just heard, but truly felt and, importantly, remembered.
Right.
Our source material for this particular deep dive is, well, it's fascinatingly practical. It actually comes from a resource designed to teach people how to tell stories in English. Yeah, but as we dug into it, it became crystal clear that the principles it lays out are absolutely universal. They're about the fundamental mechanics of crafting an effective narrative techniques that are gold, whether you're, say, sharing a wild travel anecdote, pitching an idea at work, or just trying to explain your weekend.
It cuts across language learning, really. It's about communication itself.
Precisely. So our mission today is to extract those core techniques, those fundamental insights from this source material that can empower you to make your conversations, your explanations, your interactions just more engaging, clearer, and powerfully memorable.
And that focus on empower and fundamental is key, I think. Storytelling is often kind of dismissed as maybe a fluffy, soft skill or something purely for novelists or filmmakers.
Right, just entertainment.
Yeah. But our brains are fundamentally wired for narrative. It's our primary tool for processing information, for understanding cause and effect, for transmitting knowledge across generations, and crucially, for building empathy and connection. So when you understand the mechanics of how a good story works, which this source helps demystify, you're not just learning to entertain, you're learning a profoundly effective method for ensuring your ideas land, resonate, and are retained. It's a powerful advantage in a world just saturated with fleeting information.
Absolutely. It's about tapping into how our minds naturally work. And what this source material does so well is break it down into core actionable elements. We're going to look at how to give your story a clear structure so your listener can easily follow along.
Make sense?
We'll tackle using language, specifically past tenses, as the source emphasizes for English to accurately guide your listener through the timeline of what happened.
That can be tricky.
Yeah, definitely. And perhaps most enjoyably, we'll explore the techniques for adding that crucial color or life that makes your story vivid, emotional, and truly memorable.
The good stuff.
Exactly. So let's dive straight into that first core idea the source presents. Why is being able to tell a good story actually such a valuable skill in the first place? The introduction makes a strong case, mentioning its importance with friends, meeting new people, even in a professional setting. Why is this skill so, universally applicable and impactful?
Well, think about it. In today's world, we're just bombarded with information, right?
Instantly.
A good story is like a signal in the noise.
Yeah.
It immediately grabs and holds attention in a way that just listing facts rarely can. Why? Because narratives have hooks, characters we might care about, situations that create tension or curiosity, a path towards some kind of resolution.
Right, you get invested.
Exactly. When you tell a compelling story, you become instantly more memorable. People don't just remember the topic, they remember the experience you shared, and that makes you stick in their minds.
That's a great point.
And it builds connection because you're inviting the listener into your personal reality, fostering empathy as they momentarily walk in your shoes, so to speak.
The source makes a really sharp contrast here, pointing out how quickly we lose interest in stories that lack structure or vivid details. We've all been trapped in those conversations, right?
Oh, yeah.
Someone rambling, you can't figure out where they're going, there are no interesting specifics, no color, and your mind just drifts.
Completely checks out.
The source implicitly says this is the communication killer, the opposite of engagement. It's the difference between someone leaning in, genuinely wanting to hear the next sentence, and someone politely nodding while, mentally scrolling through their phone.
Right. And while the source frames this somewhat in the context of English-speaking cultures, the human preference for narrative structure is deeply biologically embedded. From childhood, we make sense of the world through stories.
Sure.
We understand causality, A happened because of B, and sequence, first I did X, then I did Y, which led to Z, far better when they're wrapped in a narrative. It's not just cultural, it's cognitive. our brains are actually more efficient at processing and storing information presented as a story than as, say, a list of disconnected facts.
So it's like we're pre-wired for it.
Pretty much. So when you structure your communication using these narrative principles and weave in those engaging details the source talks about, you're essentially making it effortless for your listener's brain to absorb and retain what you're saying. You're leveraging their natural processing power. You're transforming information from something abstract into something experiential. Instead of just reporting the facts of your difficult commute, you tell the story of the moment you realized you were stuck, the specific grinding noise the engine made, the thought that flashed through your mind, oh no, not again. And suddenly your listener feels a bit of that frustration with you. That's the power we're talking about.
That distinction is so important, moving from just reporting facts to actually sharing an experience. It makes total sense that our brains are wired for that. Okay, so let's pivot from the why this is powerful to the fundamental how. The source highlights structure as the first essential building block, stating that without a clear flow, your listeners will get confused or just check out. And honestly, that rings so true.
It absolutely does. And the beauty of this source material is that it gives us a wonderfully simple, foundational three-step structure. It's not the only way to tell a story, of course. Complex narratives have layers.
Sure.
But this framework is brilliant for ensuring clarity and providing a reliable backbone for any story, big or small.
Okay, let's break it down.
Step 1, the beginning. Set the scene. The primary goal here is context. You need to anchor your listener, orient them in time, place, and character. The critical questions to answer are, who is involved? Where is this happening? And when did it take place?
The basics. Who, where, when.
Exactly. Now, the source makes a really insightful point here. Provide just enough background.
Right.
This isn't the time for your character's entire life history or a detailed geographical description of the location. Too much upfront detail just bogs down the story before it even starts. You need to give them the necessary coordinates and then, move on.
Get to the good stuff.
Precisely. Let's look at the source's example. Last summer, I was traveling in Italy with my best friend, Emma. See how efficient that is.
Yeah, very concise.
Last summer gives us the when. In Italy gives us the where. I and my best friend, Emma, give us the who. In a mere 8 words beyond the initial setup, you've established the core context. The listener isn't confused about the basic situation. They are immediately ready to hear what unfolds within that situation. It's like an invitation into the story.
Sets the stage perfectly. Okay, so step 1, set the scene. What's next?
Step 2, the middle, the action. This is the heart of your story. This is where you describe the sequence of events, the things that happen that make up the core narrative arc, the challenge, the discovery, the unexpected turn. This is what happens in that scene you just said.
Okay, the core events.
And the source's crucial instruction for the action is add details to make it interesting. This is where the magic happens, really. The action isn't just a list of plot points. We went here, then we did this. It's the lived experience. The details are what build tension, create vivid images, generate surprise, or elicit emotion. This is where the listener gets truly invested.
So it's not just what happened, but how it felt or looked.
Exactly. Their example here is, we got completely lost in a small village and no one spoke English. Let's break that down a bit more. We got completely lost. Okay, That's the central problem, the inciting incident for this segment.
Great, the conflict starts.
But adding in a small village provides a specific, perhaps charming or maybe frustrating setting.
Yeah.
It's more evocative than just getting lost in a city. And crucially, and no one spoke English, introduces a specific, tangible barrier to solving the problem.
Ah, raises the stakes.
It does. It raises the stakes slightly, adds potential for miscommunication or maybe funny interactions. These details aren't just reporting, they're building a miniature world and a challenge within it.
I see. It makes it much more concrete.
Consider another simple action example. Instead of just saying, then the server came over.
Okay.
You could say, then a tall server with bright pink hair and a really surprised expression walks slowly over to our table.
Huh. Okay, that paints a picture.
Right. The second version adds multiple layers of detail appearance. Tall, pink hair, and nonverbal communication. Surprised expression, walking slowly. Turning a generic event into a specific, potentially story-rich moment. You're wondering why they look surprised, why the pink hair. It adds intrigue. Much more engaging. Okay, so we have the scene, the action with details.
Yeah.
What's the final step?
Step 3, the end, the outcome. This is how it all wraps up. You need to bring your story to a clear conclusion. How is the problem resolved? What was the final state of affair after the action unfolded? You can't just leave them hanging.
Right, the resolution.
And the source adds a truly valuable layer here, suggesting you include what you learned or how you felt about the experience overall.
The reflection part.
Yeah, this elevates the story from a simple recount to something with meaning or resonance. It provides a sense of completion and can make the story's impact linger a bit longer.
Makes it feel finished. Yeah. The example they give is, in the end, a kind old man helped us find our way back, and we even got invited to his house for dinner. The resolution is clear. They found their way back. Problem solved.
Okay.
But the added detail, and we even got invited to his house for dinner, is unexpected and kind of heartwarming, right?
Yeah, that's a nice twist.
It provides a specific, positive, and memorable ending that fulfills the narrative arc initiated by getting lost. It's not just that they found their way, but how it ended with unexpected kindness and connection. This is detail working again, but this time to create a satisfying conclusion.
Breaking it down like that makes so much sense. It's not just three random parts. It's like setting the stage, describing the journey or the conflict, and then showing the result, and maybe it's significant.
Exactly. It's a logical flow.
The source then uses another short example, the skydiving one, to neatly demonstrate this three-step structure in action. It starts. Last year, I decided to go skydiving for the first time with my friend Mike. That's your perfect setting the scene when, last year, I, with my friend Mike, decided to go skydiving for the first time, establishing the context and the novel event.
Clear setup.
Then the action or middle part. We were so nervous, and right before we jumped, Mike looked at me and said, "What if my parachute doesn't open?"
Oh, wow, yeah.
This captures the core experience, the feeling, so nervous, and a dramatic moment right before we jumped, culminating in that direct speech, Mike's line. That line is a brilliant piece of action and dialogue that injects immediate tension and maybe some dark humor, showing the experience rather than just saying, Mike said something scary.
You hear his actual fear or maybe his attempt at a joke under pressure.
Yeah.
It makes Mike real.
Totally. And finally, the outcome or end. Luckily, everything went perfectly, and it was one of the most exciting experiences of my life, the resolution. Everything went perfectly.
Relief.
And the reflection learning feeling, one of the most exciting experiences of my life. Again, the simple structure creates a clear, compelling narrative flow from anticipation to climax to satisfying conclusion and reflection. It makes even a potentially complex or intense experience like skydiving easy for the listener to follow and, engage with.
It's a template that works because it mirrors the way we instinctively process events. It provides the listener with a mental map from the outset. And practicing with this simple framework, just thinking, okay, how do I start this by setting the scene? What's the main thing that happened? How did it end? Is incredibly powerful for bringing clarity to your communication. It really combats that rambling effect you mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. It gives shape to the shapeless flow of events. Now, building on that foundational structure, the source moves into the next essential layer for effective storytelling, managing the timeline, specifically by using past tenses correctly.
Yes, the grammar bit. But crucial.
Crucial. They correctly identify this as a common, tricky area, especially maybe for learners of English, but it's vital because mixing up your tenses can make your story sound chaotic or confusing about the order of things. Did this happen before that or during?
It's true. When you're recounting something from the past, you're largely operating in past tenses. But simply slapping the simple past the ed form, usually on everything, doesn't always convey the nuances of when things happened relative to each other, or whether an action was a quick event or an ongoing state.
Right, there's more subtlety to it.
Definitely. This source highlights 3 key past tenses and their specific roles in painting an accurate timeline picture for your listener.
Okay, let's unpack those.
Let's start with the past simple. This is, as I said, your workhorse. Its main job is to describe completed actions that happened at a specific point or sequence of points in the past. Think of these as the main plot points that advance the narrative. They happen one after another, driving the story forward, the steps of the story.
The main events, okay.
The source gives classic examples. We arrived at the airport and checked in for our flight. Arrived is one completed action, checked in is another. They are distinct, finished events happening in sequence. This is the core progression of the story. First this, then that.
Got it, step by step.
Or, she called me last night to tell me the news. Called is a single completed action at a definite past time last night. Boom, done.
Simple enough.
These actions form the spine of your story. They're the steps you took, the things that happened to you, the events that unfolded.
Makes sense. What's the next tense?
Next, the past continuous. Its function is different. This tense describes an action that was ongoing, in progress, at a specific point in the past. It's often used to set the scene, describe the background situation, or show a longer activity that was interrupted by a shorter, main action, which would be in the past simple. It provides context and atmosphere, the scenery.
Ah, so it's like painting the background while the main action happens.
Exactly. The source's examples really illustrate this function well. It was raining when we left the hotel. It was raining describes a condition that was happening continuously before and likely during the action of leaving. We left the hotel, past simple, is the main, shorter event. The rain wasn't the core story. It was the backdrop to the story of leaving.
Okay, I see the difference.
Another one. I was talking to my friend when I saw a celebrity. Is the longer, ongoing background activity. I saw a celebrity, past simple, is the sudden main action that happened while the talking was in progress. The talking was interrupted, or at least the seeing happened during it.
Right, one action framing another.
The past continuous adds depth and realism. It allows you to say, while I was struggling to open the stubborn old window, that's the ongoing background of the struggle, I suddenly noticed a spider the size of my hand. Noticed is the main interrupting action, past simple. It shows what the world looked like, sounded like, or what state you were in as the key events occurred. It paints a richer picture.
Okay, past simple for main events, past continuous for background. What's the third one?
Finally, the past perfect. This is the tense you use for an action or state that was completed before another past action you're already talking about.
Oh, four. Okay.
Yeah, think of it like a flashback tense, or a way to signal a prior condition. It's crucial for clarifying the sequence of events when they don't happen in strict chronological order in your telling, or when one past event was a prerequisite for another. It helps you jump back in time smoothly.
So if you need to refer to something even earlier in the past.
Exactly. Look at the source's examples. By the time we got to the station, the train had already left. You're talking about getting to the station. That's past simple. But the train leaving had already left, happened before you got there. The past perfect tells you clearly which event came first. If you just said the train left, the listener might think it left after you got there, which changes the whole story.
That makes sense. Crucial difference.
Another example. I had never tried sushi before that day. The main past point is that day when something relevant about sushi happened. Perhaps you tried it or saw it. That would be past simple. But the state of never trying it existed continuously before that specific past day. The past perfect clarifies this prior history or state.
So it sets up this situation before the main past event.
Precisely. Using the past perfect correctly prevents timeline confusion. It allows you to say things like, I was exhausted, past simple state, because I hadn't slept well the night before. Was exhausted is in the past, but the reason for it, hadn't slept, happened even earlier in the past. It provides crucial context about previous events that influence the main story point you're discussing.
That explanation makes the distinctions incredibly clear. Past simple for the steps in the journey, past continuous for the scenery along the way, and past perfect for anything that happened before you even started that particular journey or segment of the journey. It's a great way to visualize it.
That's a good way to put it.
The source even provides that little test sentence, which is perfect for drilling this home. Yesterday, I see an old friend while I walk in the park.
Right.
Based on what you just walked us through, see is a sudden completed main action. It happened in a moment.
Yeah.
And walk is the longer ongoing background activity. You were walking for a while. So you'd say, yesterday I saw past simple, the main quick event, an old friend while I was walking. Past continuous, the ongoing activity forming the backdrop in the park. It feels completely natural when you say it.
It does.
And now we understand why those tenses are used together like that to show a shorter one interrupting or occurring during a longer one.
Precisely. And practicing identifying which action is the main event, which is background, and which happened prior, is really key to building fluency and confidence in telling past stories clearly. It adds a layer of precision that prevents your listener from having to pause and mentally reconstruct your timeline. This makes it flow better for them.
Okay, so we have the structure, the beginning, middle, and end. We understand how to manage the timeline using past tenses to show sequence and duration accurately. Now, let's get to the part that transforms a clear story into a really captivating one. Adding life, adding color, making it truly engaging, as the source puts it.
Yes, this is where you move beyond just conveying information and actively work to make your listener feel the experience, to draw them in through their senses and emotions. The source offers 3 beautifully simple, yet profoundly effective techniques for this.
Simple sounds good. What are they?
First, Use descriptive words. The core idea is pretty straightforward. Swap out generic, bland words like nice, good, bad, big, small for specific, vivid ones that appeal to the senses sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, or create a strong, unique image in the listener's mind.
Okay, ditch the boring words.
Pretty much. The source's contrast examples are perfect illustrations. Instead of, the beach was nice, utterly generic, tells you almost nothing specific.
Yeah, it means nothing, really.
Try. The beach was breathtaking, with golden sand and crystal clear water. Let's pick that apart. Breathtaking is an emotional description of the beauty. It tells you how it made the speaker feel. Golden sand is a specific visual detail that creates a warm, inviting picture. Crystal clear water provides another specific visual, suggesting purity and inviting swimming or seeing the bottom. These specific words paint a picture the listener can actually see in their mind far more effectively than just nice.
Huge difference. You can almost feel the sun.
Exactly. Consider the difference between he drove an old car versus he rattled up in a beat-up cherry red sedan with mismatched doors.
Okay, again, much more vivid.
The second adds visual details. Cherry red, mismatched doors implies sound, rattled up, and description, beat up, that immediately create a much clearer, more character-rich image of the car and, perhaps the driver too. It adds personality.
Definitely. Okay, descriptive words. What's the second technique?
Second, add emotions. Share how you or the people in your story felt. Emotions are universal. We all understand fear, joy, frustration, relief, excitement, disappointment. When you share your feelings, you invite the listener to connect with you on a human level. They can empathize, imagine themselves in that situation, and feel a resonance with your experience. It builds that bridge.
Makes it relatable.
Absolutely. Again, the source provides a powerful contrast. Instead of, I was scared, a simple statement, kind of flat. I was terrified, my heart was racing, and I could barely breathe. So much more impactful. Terrified is a much stronger emotion than just scared.
Right.
But adding the physical descriptions, my heart was racing, I could barely breathe, makes the feeling of terror tangible for the listener. They can almost feel their own heart rate increase or their breath catch just hearing it. It's about showing the emotion through physical sensation or intense description, not just labeling it with a simple word.
Showing, not just telling.
That's a classic advice, and it applies perfectly here. Think about sharing good news. Saying, I was happy is fine, but I was so thrilled I actually jumped up and down and had to resist shouting. It's far more engaging. It shows the intensity of the joy, makes the listener share it a bit.
Yeah, you feel the energy. Okay, description and emotion. What's the third one?
Third, use direct speech. Dialogue, including the actual words people said, is an incredibly effective way to bring characters and moments to life. Instead of summarizing what was said, he told me to hurry up, you let the listener hear it unfold in real time in their imagination. He yelled, come on, we're going to be late. It adds authenticity, immediacy, and often drama or humor.
Ah, so quoting people directly.
Yes. The source's example here is fantastic. Instead of, the waiter told me the food was spicy, a simple, neutral report.
Okay.
Try. The waiter looked at me and said, are you sure you want to eat that? It's very spicy. This is a scene you can picture the waiter maybe leaning in. You can hear the questioning tone, the emphasis on very spicy.
Ah, yeah, much better.
It adds personality to the waiter, creates a moment of interaction, and delivers the information with more impact and a hint of warning, or maybe even humor that wasn't present in the summary. It makes the interaction feel real.
I can see how that would draw you in more.
Dialogue injects dynamism. Compare, she disagreed with the plan, with she slammed her fist on the table and declared, there is no way I am going along with this.
Wow, okay, big difference in intensity.
Right. The second version uses dialogue and action, slamming fist, to convey disagreement with far greater force and drama. It shows the listener the conflict directly, makes it more compelling.
Those examples perfectly illustrate how these three techniques, description, emotion, dialogue, layer onto the structure and timeline to make a story truly come alive. It's the difference between like a black and white sketch and a full-color immersive painting.
That's a great analogy.
The source reinforces these points with a couple more excellent examples. The restaurant one. Simple version. We had dinner at a restaurant. Okay. Functional, but dull.
Very dull.
Engaging version. We found this amazing little Italian restaurant, and the pasta was the best I've ever had. This version uses description. Amazing little Italian restaurant gives it charm and specificity, and a strong, enthusiastic opinion that conveys emotion and value. best I've ever had. It turns a generic activity into a specific, positive, memorable experience. You want to know more about that pasta?
Makes you hungry just hearing it.
Totally. And the park example? Simple. I went to the park yesterday. Again, just factual.
Yep.
Engaging. I went to the park yesterday and the sun was shining, kids were laughing, and I could hear birds singing in the trees. This version adds sensory details. What you could see, sun was shining, kids were laughing, and what you could hear, birds singing. It doesn't just state you were there. It puts the listener in the park with you, experiencing the pleasant atmosphere. It evokes a feeling.
Exactly. These techniques are about actively engaging your listener's senses, their emotions, their imagination. They're the tools you use to build that bridge we talked about earlier, allowing the listener to step into your experience for a moment.
Makes sense.
And the brilliant thing is, you don't need to apply all three techniques to every single sentence. That would be exhausting and probably sound unnatural.
Right, overkill.
Yeah. Strategic placement of a vivid description here, a touch of emotion there, or including a key piece of dialogue at a crucial moment can elevate the entire narrative. It's about choosing the details that matter most to the experience you're trying to share, the ones that add the most impact.
It's about selecting those key moments to make them shine. So bringing it all together now, we've explored the foundation of structure, beginning, middle, end, the importance of navigating the timeline accurately with past tenses, and now the power of adding life and color with description, emotion, and dialogue. The source material helpfully circles back to that simple three-step structure as a practical framework for putting all of this into practice.
So bringing it back to the foundation.
They give those very short, almost sketch-like examples like, last winter I was in New York City. Suddenly, I realized I had lost my phone in Times Square. Luckily, a kind stranger found it and returned it to me.
Simple, clear structure.
Or the variation. Last summer I was in Paris. Suddenly I realized I had lost my passport. Luckily, a kind stranger helped me find it.
And these examples are powerful because they demonstrate that you don't need a multi-act play or some grand epic adventure to apply these principles.
Right, it works for small things too.
Exactly. Even a simple, relatable event like losing something important and getting it back can be structured and enhanced effectively. You have the setting the scene, where you were in NYC Paris. You have the action, the sudden uh-oh realization of lost phone, passport. And you have the outcome, the kind stranger resolving the issue.
Clear beginning, middle, end.
And you could easily layer in those other techniques. You could add a touch of emotion. I panicked, or my heart sank, or I was so unbelievably relieved.
Yeah.
You could add a descriptive detail amidst the bustling, overwhelming crowd of Times Square, or on a quiet cobblestone street in Paris.
Paints more of a picture.
Or even a line of dialogue. He just smiled and held it up asking, "Is this yours?" Just a small touch can make it more vivid.
Right.
The key takeaway here, reinforced by these simple examples, is that storytelling isn't just for big dramatic moments. You can find narrative a beginning, middle, and end, a moment of tension or surprise, and a resolution in almost any experience, big or small. And by consciously using the structure, the right tenses to keep the timeline clear, and adding just a few carefully chosen descriptive words, emotions, or perhaps a snippet of dialogue, you can transform a simple recount of facts into a mini-story that resonates and sticks with your listener. It's about learning to see the narrative potential in the everyday.
That's a great way to frame it, finding the story in the everyday. This deep dive into the source material has been incredibly practical, I think. To quickly recap the core principles we've extracted, using the source's own framework but exploring them in a bit more detail. We saw the absolute necessity of a clear structure, setting the scene with the crucial context, who, where, when, building the action with important details in the middle, and providing a clear outcome, perhaps with a reflection on what was learned or felt.
The backbone.
Essential. And we delved into the power of using past tenses accurately to guide your listener through the story's timeline, understanding that the past simple moves the main action forward.
Step by step.
The past continuous provides the background scene and duration.
Painting the picture.
And the past perfect clarifies events that happened even earlier, preventing chronological confusion. Mastering these gives your narrative a precise sense of time.
Keeps the listener on track. Very important.
And crucially, we spent time on the techniques for adding engagement, the color, and life, using specific descriptive words that appeal to the senses.
Making it vivid.
Incorporating emotions to build connection and empathy.
Making it relatable.
And using direct speech or dialogue to make interactions feel immediate and characters feel real. These are the elements that make a story vivid and memorable.
Exactly. This source material, despite its, humble origins as a language resource, really unlocks fundamental truths about human communication. Mastering these principles doesn't just make you a better storyteller in the narrow sense. It makes you a more compelling communicator across the board.
That's the real value.
When you can structure your thoughts clearly, manage the sequence of events effectively, and inject details that make your points vivid and emotionally relevant, your ideas become sticky. People remember them, they connect with them, and importantly, they connect with you.
It really underscores that the ability to capture attention, to be understood clearly, and to be remembered isn't just some innate talent you either have or don't.
Right, it's not magic.
It's a skill set built upon foundational techniques like the ones we've discussed that anyone can learn and dramatically improve with conscious practice.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
takes awareness and effort, but it's learnable.
Definitely.
So, as you wrap up this deep dive and go back out into the world, here's maybe a thought to carry with you, something to observe and perhaps experiment with. Think about all the everyday interactions you have, sharing what happened at work, explaining a challenge you face, recounting a funny moment, or even just describing something interesting you saw.
Hmm.
How many opportunities are there to apply just one of these principles? Could adding one specific descriptive detail, the color of something, the sound it made, could adding one hint of how you actually felt in that moment, frustrated, excited, surprised? Could including one recalled line of dialogue change how that interaction lands?
Just one small change.
Maybe. And also, pay attention to the stories you hear today. Which ones are memorable? Which ones pull you in? Can you identify the techniques we discussed being used, even subtly? Structure, vivid words, emotion, dialogue.
Become a story detective.
Sort of. Perhaps the next time you share something, big or small, consciously try applying just one of these simple principles from the source material. Focus on the structure, or use a specific tense deliberately, or throw in a really good descriptive word, or mention an emotion, or quote someone directly and simply notice the difference it makes. Observe how your listener responds. It might be quite revealing.